Ancient Wallachia was founded by the Romans, and as such, the area originally comprised of some 48,000 miles, the approximate size of modern-day New York. There were some Big Apple-sized expectations that are required of a visiting ambassador to royalty there. As Togovist was becoming the capital in 1385, they got Vlad Tepes III. As such, the land of the mountains had much in store. Back in the day, Italian delegates were forced to endure having their skull caps opened on the fear of having their heads nailed through for less of an insult. Having told Vlad Tepes III, son of the dragon, that it was their custom to keep their hats on in the presence of bigwigs, the prince made sure their heads were permanently subjugated to the respective headgear, proclaiming, "Believe me, this is the manner in which I strengthen your customs." It might be brainboxed that this is the heart of diplomacy. Not only requires a courage, but faith also. Of course, courage and faith are both crisis fallbacks when pummeling the challenge of a mental disability such as psychosis and a lack of external validity that is diluted from a sprog with royal expectations thrust upon them. The art of finding common ground in the process of brotherly romance in a nation sees a stinker in the pursuit of a solidified unity, although in notorious conflict with the Turks over decades, Drac Tepes was officially tapped on the shoulder and told of his father's death by an ancient relative and step-grandfather, Sultan Mehmed II, at the end of 1447. Now, I think it is the quest for external validity, again often seen in such a cirque. It was the hug of thrust which had been boiled and cultivated when Drac was growing up inside a Turkish camp that helped in such a recipe in the bumping off of his father's murderer, Vlad II. Vlad made a move to take his rightful place at the Wallachian throne, despite the fields that spilled out of the Draconian on a regular. Perhaps all this could have been achieved without faith and the diplomacy of his brothers. Now, Vlad Tepes himself was born around, I think it was 1465. His father was one of a line whose first known ancient ancestor was Barazad the Great, who was like 1310 to 1352. With his brother Radu, Drac was handed over to the fiendish Turkish camp at the age of 11 or 12. Literally, he got adopted by them, having first been captured by them. But it was a whole thing going on. Torn away from the fledgling ties at such an age, especially for a younger son, is an understandable cause of a fracturing personality that Drac displayed in later life. He was no taller than a bouquet of flowers. Now, for the next 6 years, Drac, a sproget, he lived among the Turks without pater or mater. The light at the end of the tunnel might have been seen in 1460 when Vlad made an X on a treaty with the Transylvanian Saxons to bet the odds towards fighting against the Turks. Reckless behaviour seen constantly in his fledgling personality. This secured the end of the arguments with the Hungarian king and allowed Vlad to hold his father's cause as a member of the Order of the Dragon, which his father had founded. bonding with the memory of deceased well is a sure prodigy of faith. The order, a Christian movement, was formed to make nations and understand their individualism and diversity. At heart, this target might have been deemed a good call, despite the resultant bloodshed and psychopathy in doing so. Vlad alleged that his country had been bled and his treasury exhausted by the 3 years of struggle with his German political foes in the Transylvania and by domestic upheaval among the boyars. Financial empty bags now? Well, they were, really, basically. He asserted that if I should leave my country, my political opponents would invite the Hungarian king to rule over all my domains. Now, this was his constant fear, and it was against the churchy code by which his dip relations flourished between peoples. A diplomacy that held sway at the point of his determination and sword. Faith holding the party overall. Indeed, the sort of sound bites and give and take that are made in the name of peace were at issue even in the 15th century. It is a sad sit that such an issue cannot be said to be tackled with ease and success, but at a good deal of pedigree and know-how. That, in itself, were likely to produce an insecure personality. But the tutor engaged by Vlad Dracula, Vlad's pater, was an elderly, highly educated boyar who had fought on the Christian side at the Battle of Nicopolis. This man scholared Drac in Italian and possibly a smattering of French and Hungarian. It is to be wondered whether this was an apt education for a fighting chap who would one day be the scourge of his world around the Danube. We hold a downer as we reflect that without such wars and conflict that are based on a douse of belief in faith rather than fortune, we end up in a situation of backtracking postmodernism like today. Yeah. It is not to sign off on the understanding that veering towards ethnic wars should be chivied in any fashion, though progress in its wake can be seen in many academic eyes throughout history. With this stormy and prominent concoction of gunpowder, totally spinning the marked way of warfare, astrologers would crystal ball the outcome of battle according to the soothsaying of the stars. Now, we brainbox this toxic influence to some great degree, although this was as nothing when brainboxing Drac's usage of tactics with speed and guerrilla war stuff, which he found most amusing when in the war and dip conferencing. Yet another keen mirroring of this week, it could be said. He trained warriors by trudging them through the present-day Yugoslavia to the Black Sea and past the Danube. When he didn't stick to his word of peace with Sultan Mehmet II, Vlad boasted, "I have killed men, women, young and old, who lived at Obexia and Novelestio, where the Danube flows into the sea, up to Rahovia, which is located near Chilia. From the lower Danube up to such places as Smorbit and Gilligan. We killed 23,884 Turks and Bulgarians, without counting those with whom we burned in homes, or whose heads were not cut by our soldiers." The firmament of Drac's pile in Terlavik can still be distinguished from the towering remains of subsequent editions, But little is left of his place except for the Chinder Tower. But it did provide a comfortable platform for him to eyeball the punishments that were handed out in the courtyard below in 1476. Comfort was essential to Drac's life in many ways. But all of this in his walkabout for a better and more splendid trading system for his peeps, as well as a church-going devotee, a lifetime of devoting himself to others. But despite Drac's habits for torture and punishment of his boyars, politicians, his holding towards religious and spiritual betting was without measure. It is to be noted that his mindset towards dip and political standing was not put down with the construction of tunnels beneath his castle in Transylvania in the Smalls. He was always used by way of evacuation, only to fight another day. In this, neither his dyspraxia nor his schizophrenia stopped him. It was used to escape from his sibling, who overtook Turk of East in 1462. He did though donate such funds as he felt good to his favourite monasteries in Olentia, because of which the choir chaps there celebrated him profusely as chanting, "You are appointed by God to punish evildoers." This was a sign he took his divine right in both national identity and obligation to rule. It might also be considered a devotion to chats with other nations that is sadly lacking today. Now, with the recent revelation that our own Archbishop of Canterbury is defending his right towards political and towards the instruction and partaking of politics, this might be taken as an affirmation of what might be built if it were pondered to be a permanent tipping of the hat. It is to be questioned as to whether Drac's defence could be buffered by the fact that merchants and business owners were given their freedom to conduct such talks as regards to their trade, even with nations with hostilities taking place. I mean, come on. A tricky one to pull off, and pushing the boundaries of health and safety to some great degree. Not that I believe now. I don't know, it really all depends how you look at it, but the point is, it was to some great degree. He was protective of such successful businesses. It is said that those who threatened the German Saxons and merchants of Transylvania fell upon his temper quite severely. Dracula also hated evil in his land, that if someone lied or committed some injustice, he was not likely to stay alive, whether he was a nobleman, a priest, a monk, or a common man. It is, of course, not a proper and valid examination of Drac's foreign policy without talking of his favourite form of amusement and torture of his enemies and of his people. His ethics in this regard are highly questionable today, although not undertaken without reason, considering his faith and the times involved. Despite being practised on a big platter, impalement was not of Wallachian innovation in the slight. The diversification and influence of other cultures expands the understanding of fractured personalities, though, and impaling was originally posted by the Turks and the Balkan rulers, not to mention the Moldavians. I refer you to Stephen of Moldavia, who impaled 2,300 Wallachians through the navel in 1473. But Drac only did so through the disposition in sending a message to his Turkish enemies. innocent until proven guilty? In fact, there have been many a modern headstrings who have polished Vlad's state of mind and tipples and cast them as personality disorders that cannot be explained. But Vlad's mistress scolded him when pouting that she would rather have her body rot and be eaten by fish of the Argue than be led into captivity by the Turks. But it was after this that she hurled herself from the upper battlements, her body falling down the precipice below, although enough to fold up anyone's mind to start with, and that's just fundamental. But such a travesty might conceivably be put down to his captive childhood and rape at the hands of the Turkish Sultan's cousin, although such a trauma can't have done him much good to an already psychopathic personality. But when Drac became prince in 1456, the new Vede sought with vigour to maintain good and social relations with German Saxons in trade talks, desperately trying to appease even then. This might have been a decision taken in order to gain support for the throne and through the Hungarian king, Ladislaus V, an external validity reliant on persona. But it was only because of the Siegi-Ohr agreement of the same year that this was made a solid position for a short while, as the Germans could not really be said to have any idea of realising their refugee traders. A lesson in chatting on treaties and institutional reform referendums, when today the switching of loyalties is abundant. But in finding an alternative support for such a deal, Drac resorted to papal support. Though the adherence to his faith, as previously stated, this support was validified by the Pope's recognition of his loyalty, and in 1460 he renewed loyalty to the Hungarian king through the negotiations and support of Rome. He was also leased with all that stuff. As such, he was given the ability again to partake in the vows he had made as a prince of the Order of the Dragon, religious fervour that could be of benefit in this particular decade. It was, however, a constant worry for him that his treasury was depleted throughout the years of struggle and alienation through his Germanic political foes within Wallachia. And empty bags again. The bags of the country were empty. Now, such was this worry that Drac feared that if he fled the country for any reason, that the Hungarian king would nab his throne for himself, a paranoia that defined his throne. For, he said, if I should leave my country, my political opponents would invite the Hungarian king to rule over my domains. Now, Drac did have a mind to focus his attentions on the northern part of his land, where he founded the fortress of Bucharest, and a lot of villages thereabouts with it. Târgovist was this sprawling town outside of that fortress, beyond the villages. He then constructed a castle high up on the mountains as a defence, found in the mountains of Argue. It could give shelter over there, and Drax headed from his enemies, as he had the propensity to make on the constant. Drac was, in essence, what we might call today a Brexiteer. funny to consider. But with his intent being to deem his kingdom a sacrament to the holy world, but with the prospect of the constantly invading Turks and their heathen beliefs. However, we should not pile on the doubt of his abilities in peace talks and faith that are sadly lacking today. The fact that he had the penchant for executing German Saxons outside of the gates of the city is what earned him the name of the Impaler. Now, not only are our own desperate attempts to recapture a bygone age taking us towards the destruction that has happened to so many cultures before us, we do not even have the redeeming qualities of a faith as a nation anymore. At least Drac had the hard ground to stand on that much. But it was in 1461 that the church devoted to Constantinople, Constantine the Great, was founded at Tixor, validifying his reign to the last. The church of St. Nicole bore the inscription, "By the grace of God, the ruler of Ungar-Wallachia, son of the great Prince Vlad, have built and completed the church on June the 24th, 1461. But he would swap old priests of Turgabis with that of the more Sunday Rose Catholic faith. Such a fate, which is soon to befall our own political representative of Rome, though. Our own bias and ignorance of lessons of history might teach. This is an offshoot of the Romanian view that Wallachia was to defend against the onslaught of barbarism from the Orient. Gypsies and Balears would serve him in this purpose. Such was his faith in the people to defend his northern borders. Such a faith as in one's own pot is not seen in postmodern times. At the end of the day, Drac's faith took him to the nths of orthodox religion in the practice of that honour with which he was suckled. He found he had to grasp with a bite onto his throne through pathological paranoia. But when he died in 1477, at the hands of his own brother, he didn't betray his passion for the church in favour of earthly pursuits. In achieving a state of pole position for his people, he was eventually exorcised from the Catholic faith. Struggle never found a home with the guy. The beatings from those outside Wallachia turned on him. Is this the danger we are given today? Faith of scientific reason defeating that of our faith of our religious leaders that have had a right to their position for centuries? Are we all becoming so paranoid to create all this? Such an assertion cannot be answered by one single individual, but weighed up by the masses, as Drac would have had it. Now, it was said by the priests of his church outside his dominions, somewhere in Russia, that Drac loved the sweetness of the earthly world much more than the eternal world, and he abandoned orthodoxy and thereby forsook the truth and accepted darkness, ending his life in heresy. This was deemed as his punishment at the time of his demise. Not entirely certain of this. The well-known portrait of Vlad is now hung at Castle Ambras near Innsbruck. His tomb, that is covered with relics of his station, purple embroidered cloak and gold frontalpiece, was the final resting place of his rotting corpse that embodied the positive aspects of his people. a double-edged sword, perhaps, of political negotiations can only be wielded with the care of monarchic and religious faith. However, that course has led us in the past to the destruction of national relations. Drac is a hero of today and of his own national consciousness, a devout believer in the purity of their souls. Give us a good clicking, guys.
Shakanaka.